Avalanches are a topic I've covered numerous times while making videos for my channel, as unpredictable, often huge, sweeping avalanches are a common cause of death for mountaineers. The looming, near constant, and often arbitrary threat of being buried alive in an avalanche is an accepted risk within the sport, and unfortunately, avalanches have claimed the lives of even some of the world's highest caliber climbers, including Marc-Andre Leclerc, Alexander Ruchkin, and David Lama. Most of these deadly avalanches are triggered by massive chunks of falling ice or rock or other debris from above, which in turn causes a huge volume of snow to thunderously cascade down a peak's slopes. However, for those of you that have watched my video about the massive earthquake in Nepal in 2015 are well aware, the potential scale and lethality of avalanches increases immensely when the earth itself shakes the thick layers of snow loose from a massive mountainside slopes, with the power of such an avalanche being caught on film that year by climbers at the base camp of Mount Everest, an avalanche that would ultimately claim the lives of 22 people. However, this was truly displayed by another incident I covered in that same video, when the village of Longtong was completely buried by an avalanche and subsequent mudslides stemming from the slopes of a nearby peak, Longtong Lorong, completely obliterating the village and claiming 243 lives in the process. However, the scale of these aforementioned avalanches and the subsequent loss of life in both pales in comparison to the avalanche that is the topic of today's video, an avalanche that was so massive and so deadly that the number of people killed as a result outnumbers every death in every video I've posted thus far on my channel, combined. On Sunday, May 31st, 1970, at 3:23 p.m. in the Pacific Ocean, 22 miles off the coast of central Peru, a powerful underwater earthquake measuring at a magnitude of 7.9 rocked the seafloor, emanating powerful shock waves from its epicenter, violently jostling the surrounding region. As I also touched on in my video about the earthquake in Nepal, when earthquake magnitudes are measured on the Richter scale, the seismic energy of quakes is measured in comparison to the seismic energy released per ton of the explosive TNT. This magnitude 7.9 earthquake released seismic energy that was equivalent to 10,675,994 tons of TNT. This earthquake triggered powerful tremors that were felt across 83,000 square kilometers, devastating the Peruvian regions of Ancash and La Libertad as it rocked the nation for an excruciating and devastating 45 seconds, causing immense infrastructural damage and casualties in cities and towns stretching from Pisco to Tumbes to Iquitos. However, the tremors of the massive earthquake would also reverberate through the Peruvian Andes as well, which would subsequently trigger the deadliest avalanche in human history. Amongst the Peruvian Andes in the Cordilla Blanca range, which also happens to be the location of Huandoy Sur, a peak I covered in a video a couple weeks back, lies a massive mountain known as Mount Huascaran, towering at a height of 22,205 feet at its peak. The true summit of Huascaran is also the highest point in the entire nation of Peru. The peak features two distinct summits separated by a large snow-capped saddle between them, with the southern summit being the peak's true summit, with the northern summit, known as Huascaran Norte, standing at a lower elevation of 21,831 feet. Huascaran's broad slopes bear an intimidating appearance, with huge looming seracs crusted along its dense, frozen rocky slopes, with huge masses of thick layers of snow blanketing the peak's gentler reliefs. On the afternoon of May 31st, 1970, the tremors from the massive magnitude 7.9 earthquake violently began to shake Mount Huascaran, which was located just 114 miles away from the epicenter of the earthquake. During the span of the 45 seconds of their duration, these massive tremors wreaked havoc on Huascaran's slopes, as the intense, violent shaking of the earth broke loose thousands of tons of ice and displaced the layers of thick snow that had settled on the peak, sending them cascading down the mountain slopes with fearsome fury. Furthermore, as the powerful tremors continued to jostle Huascaran over the course of the quake's duration, the intense seismic shaking caused a huge slab of rock to shear from the western face of Huascaran Norte, which greatly exacerbated the intensity of the massive avalanche that thundered down Mount Huascaran's slopes. By the time the tremors had run their course, a 2,990 foot wide, 1 mile long, powerful, sweeping avalanche thundered into the valley below, rushing towards the nearby town of Yungay at an average speed of 190 miles per hour. Located approximately 11 miles from the foot of Huascaran's slopes, it wouldn't take long for the enormous avalanche to reach the town of Yungay, and while the townspeople were still reeling in the aftermath of the initial quake, just minutes after the earthquake had ended, the enormous, sweeping avalanche slammed into the town with violent ferocity, traveling now at a speed of 692 miles per hour, quickly engulfing the entire town in a sea of 80 million meters cubed of fast-moving debris. The immense force of the avalanche quickly leveled the town's structures, which, in a matter of mere moments, were swept up into the avalanche's powerful flow and launched further into the valley below. As for the town's 20,000 some odd residents at the time, the arbitrary and unpredictable nature of the earthquake, combined with the fast flow of the huge Huascaran avalanche, all but sealed a majority of the townspeople's fates, as 20,000 residents of Yungay were killed by the violent flow of the massive avalanche, with 400 further residents of the town miraculously managing to survive the apocalyptic avalanche and escape the incident with their lives intact. Of these survivors, 300 of them were children, as allegedly a clown from a local circus that had been performing at the time of the quake saw the avalanche forming on Huascaran and led most of the children that had been in attendance to higher ground. One survivor from Yungay recalled the harrowing events of May 31st, 1970, stating, quote, "We heard a deep noise, different from the earthquake, but not so much so. It was coming from Huascaran, and we saw between the mountain and Yungay a giant cloud of dust. The quake had caused an avalanche. Part of Huascaran was falling. You could see a giant wave of gray mud, about 60 meters high, about to hit the left-hand side of the city. This wave was certainly not dust. The sky went dark. We looked around. Yungay and its many thousands of inhabitants had disappeared," he recalled. Unfortunately, however, the inhabitants of the town of Yungay were not alone in their bleak fates, as around the same time as it had engulfed Yungay, the mighty, violent avalanche would inflict tragedy of a similar nature upon another local township, the village of Ranrahirsa, as the flow continued to violently cascade into Rio Longanuco below. The 1,800 or so residents of Ranrahirsa were met with a similarly violent barrage of debris as the avalanche quickly engulfed the village and its occupants within its unrelenting flow, swiftly leveling the village's structures and burying the remnants of the village and its occupants within its massive 66-foot deep debris field. killing all 1,800 people in the village at the time of the disaster. Notably, the largest singular boulder in the path of the slide came to rest where Ron Rahirsa once stood, with the gargantuan boulder weighing in at 31 million pounds. 2 other small local villages that were destroyed as a result of the avalanche, Huascaran and Inkayak, were met with a barrage of these massive boulders weighing thousands of tons that rained immense destruction from above as they crashed over the hilly terrain and into the villages, leveling numerous buildings and killing many of the village's occupants and their livestock, crushing them in an enormous rock slide, with some of the boulder's impact craters in the area measuring up to 8 meters deep. In the village of Huascaran, approximately 50 people were killed by the falling boulders, with a further 259 people from the village of just 900 residents losing their lives as they were subsequently swept up and buried within the enormous avalanche. The unrelenting flow of the massive avalanche would continue on its path of widespread destruction for quite some time as the avalanche continued to flow downhill, sweeping up 2 mountaineers as it cascaded onwards, spreading the debris field across an increasingly wide area, flooding and subsequently damming the rivers below, wreaking havoc upon the settlements along these rivers as the immense volume of debris cascaded into them from above. The most densely amassed section of this debris field was 80 meters deep in some areas, with the dispersing rubble damming the Rio Santa so badly that a lake measuring 2 kilometers long was temporarily formed for 9 days as a result. As more avalanche debris continued to thunder down into the Rio Santa from above and into the dammed water below, the displacement of the water by the fast-moving materials created massive tsunami-like waves of debris that reached vertical heights in the air as high as 272 feet, which subsequently wrought destruction to a significant portion of the nearby town of Montecado. When it was all said and done, the enormous avalanche's debris field spanned across a total of 3,700 acres and had completely leveled multiple townships and had further claimed the lives of an estimated 30,000 people, as an exact death toll for the incident is a near impossibility due to the expansive, deep debris field left in its wake. Some experts have speculated that the death count could, in actuality, number as high as 35,000 people killed, as the avalanche occurred on a Sunday, the local market day, where it was common for villagers from outside villages to gather and peddle their wares at the larger villages' markets. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the Peruvian government would receive widespread international support and aid money in their efforts to recover from the immense damage wrought by the initial earthquake and the carnage inflicted by the subsequent Huascaran avalanche. As Peruvian officials assessed the immense destruction of the Yungay region, they attempted to relocate many of the local people to Peru's metropolitan areas. However, this effort was met with widespread resistance from the locals, who insisted they remain living in the region. In wake of the tragedy, the Peruvian government declared the site of the original Yungay township as a national cemetery and place of mourning, forbidding anyone from building on the site or excavating the location for the dead or any other artifacts within it. However, 5 years after the tragedy, with the help of the international aid money, Yungay was rebuilt anew nearby the site of the old village. The rebuilt village is known formally as Yungay Norte, while the ruins of the original Yungay village have become formally known as Yungay Viejo. Interestingly, in the years following its establishment, Many of the original inhabitants that had stayed in the region until Yungay Norte's completion began to migrate to cities along the coast and were replaced there by migrants from elsewhere in Peru, as Yungay sports a population today that is very similar to the old village of Yungay with 20,000 some odd residents. This avalanche on May 31st, 1970 is the deadliest avalanche in history, and the avalanche and preceding magnitude 7.9 earthquake are the deadliest and most catastrophic natural disasters in Peruvian history. Thank you all for watching.